have Brother Scott Deal coming up. Those of you know he got elected by the church to serve as a deacon here. Normally, whenever we do the deacon ordination service in there, we try to let them share their testimony that same night. Somehow we missed that this time. So we're going to give him an opportunity to do that this morning. I know he's probably a little bit nerve-wracked over there this morning because I've been in his shoes. But so let's lift him up this morning. And Brother Scott, you come on and you share what the Lord laid on your heart this morning.
You expect to hear from God. And I'm the one that's tasked to give you what you expect to hear. And that's a huge responsibility. That's a huge responsibility, thank you. But it's also a huge privilege because God uses people. He doesn't have to use people, but he does. And before I really get started this morning, there's some people here that I need to thank. I'm sitting back here with my wife, wherever she's at, back there, there she is my brother-in-law Kevin and his wife Linda, and my nephew Sarah and her husband Mike and their kids. And Sarah and Mike had just moved to Alaska, or from Alaska down here, when I took sick. And for those of you that don't know, my wife had just had cancer and had surgery and got the cancer out and went through chemo. And they had found a spot on her lung, and so she had to have lung surgery, and they took a lobe of her lung out, and she wasn't able to drive. She wasn't able to pick up anything. She wasn't able to do anything. And so Sarah and Mike and Kevin became her chauffeur, and Linda took care of the kids while everything was going on with me in the hospital, and I just want to publicly say thank you. I don't have a close family. My wife does, I don't. And it's been an experience being married to her and being in a close family because I'm a loner. But it's neat to watch families work together like ours does. And she's not here this morning, but there's a young nurse. You know who I'm talking about, your daughter. I didn't know this lady, but when we had our sunrise service and I was over in the fellowship hall drinking coffee, man cannot live by bread alone, he must have coffee. And my wife came and got me and she said, there's someone here you need to meet, and there's a young nurse named Katie. And I don't remember Katie. I was in a coma. I don't remember her. But my wife said she is the one that fought so hard to keep me alive when I was in a coma in ICU. Tell her thank you for me. And lastly, and not lastly that I'm done, lastly, I want to thank all y'all because you all prayed. I'm a firm believer that prayer works. I'm a walking miracle. And when Pastor Tim sends out those messages of praying for so-and-so because they're going through whatever, I'm still the new kid on the block here. I'm still trying to figure out who everybody is. And I don't always know everybody, but I've learned to stop and whisper a prayer. And because you all prayed, I'm here. And I want to say thank you. There's been a verse going over in my mind for several months. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. Just a simple verse found in Psalm 46, verse 10. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." That verse has been going over in my mind for months now as God is teaching me how to be quiet in my heart and quiet in my mind and slow down and really know that He is God. But here's something I love about the Bible, because you can read verses over and over and over again, and all of a sudden God points out something new to you that you never saw before. And I don't know why I never saw this, but I've read the Psalms I don't know how many times. It says, "Be still and know that I am God." But what does it say next? God says, "I will be exalted." It doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter what's going on. It doesn't matter where we're at. I will be exalted. And I love that. I love that. As I tell my story this morning, I want to take you back to August of 2002, I was serving in Alaska as a police officer for the city of North Pole. That's not the geographic North Pole. That's a bedroom community of Fairbanks, about 15 miles southeast of Fairbanks on the Alaska Highway. And my current role as an officer during that time was I was part of an interagency DUI enforcement team. My sole purpose in coming to work was to take drunk drivers off the road. And we worked with Fairbanks Police. We worked with the state troopers in Alaska, or the Alaska State Troopers. And the state troopers were 15 miles from us. They called me about a possible drunk driver sitting in the roadway just south of our town and asked me to go respond. And as I drove down the highway, he was over on the frontage road. I saw his pickup, a white Chevy pickup sitting in the middle of the road, circled around and drove up behind him. And as I came up behind him, he put it in reverse and tried to run into my patrol car. And I got him stopped. I got stopped, got out of his way, called for a second unit, and got out of the car and walked up to his truck. And he was belligerent right from the get-go. He wouldn't do anything I asked him to do. It was obvious that he was drunk. And I did something that no police officer should ever do. I taught officer safety and street survival. That was one of my areas of expertise. But I did something. I violated a principle of officer safety. I reached in the window of the truck, across in front of him, and got the keys out of the ignition. Never, never, never do that. Because all he's got to do is pin my arm against his chest, put it in gear, and now he's dragging me down the road. And there's cops that have died doing that very thing. Fortunately, he didn't do that. I got the keys out of the ignition. I threw him in the bed of the truck. I opened the door and ordered him out. And as soon as his feet hit the pavement, we were in a fight. And as it turned out, we were in a fight for my life. He outweighed me by about 50 pounds, had about 4 inches of height on me, and he was drunk and not feeling anything. This was in the days before tasers. I pulled my pepper spray and went to pepper spray him. He knocked it out of my hand, which told me he's been down that road before. And I ended up in the ditch between the frontage road and the highway, face down on the ground, with him on top of me, beating me into the ground. And I remember this happening to me. I've read about it happening. Never knew anybody it happened to, but it was as if, while he's beating me into the ground, it was as if I stepped back about 10 feet, and I'm watching him beat me into the ground. I don't know how that happens, but it happened. And as I'm watching him beat me into the ground, a thought came to my mind, this is it. Here's where I buy the farm. I'm not going home tonight. And as soon as that thought hit me, another thought came, and I can't say it the way I said it in those days, because I wasn't walking with Jesus in those days. I don't talk that way anymore. But I basically said, no, I am not going to die here in this ditch on the side of the road with this guy on top of me. And somehow, and I don't know how to this day, somehow I got out from underneath him. I pulled my weapon, pointed it at him, and again, I can't tell you how I said it, but I told him, you get on the ground or I'll shoot you where you stand. Apparently, he saw by the look on my face and the tone of my voice that I would do exactly what I said, and he laid down. And I realized at that point, I'm left-handed, I realized at that point that I had no grip. My hand hurt all the way to my shoulder. I had no grip. I was holding on to my gun just by sheer adrenaline. And I transitioned over to my right hand, tucked my arm up against my chest, and fell to my knees. And I told him again and again, I can't tell you how I told him, but I basically told him, you lay there, and if you try to get up, I will shoot you right where you lay. And my first two backup units got there, and I fell to the ground. And the short version of the long story is they took him to jail. I went to the hospital and spent the next 3 months recovering. Keep in mind what I said about stepping outside of my body. That'll come into play in a few minutes here. I've always been healthy. I've really never had any physical problems. But in October of 2022, I was serving as the chief of security for Columbia International University, and I went to work on a Friday, and I didn't feel good. My stomach was bothering me. And as the day wore on, I felt worse and worse. And I finally told my lieutenant, I said, you're in charge, I'm going home. And I went home. And I felt lousy that night. I felt lousy the next morning. My wife had to work. She works at CIU as well. She works with the admissions team. And they had a special event that day. She went to work. As the day went on, I felt worse and worse. It felt like my guts were in a vice, and somebody was just cranking the handle tighter and tighter and tighter. It got so bad that I was crying out in pain, and I don't do that. And about the time I began to text my wife to say, when are you coming home? she called me. We always call each other. It's part of my law enforcement days. We always call each other when we're on the road and coming home. She called and said, I'm on my way home. And I said, you need to get here. I'm sick. I don't know what's going on, but I'm sick. And she came home, and she began to work her way through the process of the teledoc, if you're familiar with that, and that's a process. And I finally told her I was crying out in pain. I hurt so bad. And I finally told her, I said, screw it, call me an ambulance. I need to go to the hospital. So she did, and I went to Camden Emergency Room. By the time I got there, I was shaken so much from the pain, and I hurt so bad. I don't know how I stayed on the bed in the emergency room. They gave me a hit of morphine. It didn't work. They gave me a second hit, and it kind of took the edge off, but I still hurt. And during this time, my doctor, my primary care doctor, Dr. Adams, walked in. And I thought they had called him. I said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, I work a shift or two in the emergency room, and they called me and asked me to come in and look at you. And it gave me great comfort because he knows me. He knows who I am. This is God working. He knows me. He knows who I am. He knows my medical history. And it gave me great comfort to have him there. They sent me in upstairs for an MRI, and when I came back down, they said, your colon has twisted. I didn't know it could do that. But it did. And Dr. Adams was going to transfer me downtown, but he said, I'm afraid you're not going to make it before your colon bursts, and if it bursts, you're in big trouble. And so he said, let me call the surgeon. And I said, I trust you. Do what you think is right. And he called the surgeon. The surgeon that was on call was Dr. Ed Gill. Some of you know him. He's a man of God. He prays over his patients. That's another God thing. He came in and he looked at the test and he said, your colon is twisted. And he said, I think I can run a scope in and straighten it out. But he said, you need to understand if I can't or if something goes wrong, it is immediate surgery. And I hurt so bad, I said, Doc, I don't care. Take the whole colon out if that's what you got to do. I don't care. Took me upstairs, knocked me out. He ran a scope in. They were able to straighten it out, and I was fine. Went home fat and happy. Well, not fat, but happy. Never been fat. In a follow-up appointment with Dr. Adams on Monday, he said you had a near-death experience. And in a follow-up with Dr. Gill, I kind of had to chuckle. He's sitting in a chair across from me. He took a piece of paper, and he's holding it like this, and upside down he drew the intestines. It looked like he could have taken it out of a textbook. And he said, here's where it twisted. If it happens again, then we have to have surgery, and that section comes out. Hindsight's 20/20, foresight's 2200. What I should have said, or maybe what I should have said is, Doc, why don't we do surgery? Why don't we just schedule it and take it out now so it won't happen again? But apparently he didn't think it was necessary, and we're guys, we don't do that. I felt good. I went out. Took the rest of the week off, went back to work. Everything was fine. Until December 5th. December 5th, I began to get in pain again. And as I hurt more and more, I told my wife, I said, it's happening again. You need to call me an ambulance. And she called me an ambulance. They took me back to the emergency room in Camden. They took me upstairs for another MRI, and my colon had twisted again. And I can't do anything during business hours. I have to do it on weekends or after business hours, so they had to call the on-call surgeon. She came in. It was a different one this time. It was a lady. She came in. Yes, your colon's twisted. They knocked me out. I don't remember any of this. I had to go by what my wife is telling me. They knocked me out, but she said the same thing. I can run a scope in, I can straighten it out, which she was able to do. And she told my wife, that will get him through the night, but tomorrow it's surgery. And so the next day they took me into surgery. I do remember going into surgery because I thought it was funny. They were playing rap music and cracking jokes. I don't like rap music. But they were playing rap music and cracking jokes. That's all I remember. I had the surgery. The surgery went fine. I was back in my room, but I was in tremendous pain. I was on 24/7 heavy pain medication, and I can remember as the medication began to wear out, just crying for more meds and more meds. And, well, you got to wait a little bit, but I just could hardly stand it. And during this time, when I was in so much pain, I began to quote Scripture. Mary recorded me on the phone because that's where my mind went when I was in so much pain. I quoted verse after verse and chapter after chapter. If you had her phone, you could listen to me laying there quoting Scripture. And it blessed my wife because she knows where I came from. I got saved in 1977. And God did a complete turnaround. I was living a wicked life. But I also got into some very unscriptural teaching, and I couldn't live it. You can't live teachings that's not scriptural. And a couple of years after my wife and I got married, I finally told God, screw it, I cannot do this, I quit. Leave me alone. Now here's where my Baptist theology kind of gets a little mixed up, because I don't believe God jerks your salvation from you because you screw up. But I believe we have the choice to walk away, and that's what I did. And I spent 19 years telling God, leave me alone, I don't want anything to do with you. I'm done. Got back to Jesus in 2011, January of 2011, so my wife knew what I came out of, and to hear me laying there quoting Scripture, that just blessed her heart. And I'm thankful that's where my mind went. 13th of December, Mary and Sarah walked in. Sarah brought Mary to the hospital. They walked in my room. I'm sitting in my chair, and Mary said my head was back, my eyes were rolled back, and in her words, I was about 5 minutes from meeting Jesus. I was unresponsive. My blood pressure had tanked. She called for the nurse. I had a great nurse, a guy named Chris. I really liked him. We had a lot of talks while we were in there. I remember that. But she called him. He came in, tried to snap me out of it. He couldn't do it. They called the code. The only thing I remember about that is I remember opening my eyes, and I'm looking into the faces of people I did not know as they're looking at me and shouting orders and wheeling me down a hallway really fast. And I went into the elevator doors went shut, and that's the last I remember of December. The rest of December is gone. They ran some more tests, and Dr. Gill ran some more tests, and they found out that the surgery that I had come apart. I found out later that nationally 10% of those surgeries come undone. Again, I can't do anything right. I happen to fall into the 10%. It came apart, and it filled me with sepsis from head to toe. And I was in bad shape. They took me to ICU. They began to prep me for surgery. During this time, I saw Jesus face to face. I don't know how that happens, but I saw Jesus face to face. There was like a chasm between us, and Jesus is standing there. My brother-in-law Don was standing there. A friend of mine named Jeff was standing there. My best friend Ed was standing there. My mom and dad were standing there, all in a row. Jesus on this side, and everybody in a row, not saying anything, not doing anything, just watching me. But I saw Jesus face to face, and I told Mary, I saw Jesus. And I don't remember this. She said, I went down. Here's how you spend the life insurance. Here's what you do with my truck. Here's what you do with the trailer. Here's what I just itemized it out for her. Here's what I want you to do in case this goes south. I told her that I hurt so bad that I just want to go to heaven. I did not know you could hurt so bad and still live. Prior to the surgery, Dr. Gill came in, and he told Mary, and I believe Kevin was there, and Sarah and Mike, you were there. Pastor was there. The guy that took over for me at CIU when I retired was there. And he told Mary, he said, your husband is in very bad shape. He is very sick. He has to have a second surgery. I will do my best, but I don't think he's going to live through it. And if he does, it'll be touch and go for the next few days. Remember what I thought Mary told me that. I thought she told me, Doc says you're going to die. She said she never did. But you remember what I said about stepping outside of my body? I watched Dr. Gill from up above. I watched him walk into that room and tell my wife that I wasn't going to live. I don't know how that happens, but I watched it happen. And I knew that Doc said I wasn't going to live. I had the surgery. They put me in a medically induced coma. They flushed 17 liters of fluid through me to clean out the infection. I don't know how much that is, but I guess it's a lot. And I was now in a very desperate fight for my life. I don't remember that. I just remember intense pain. We have one daughter named Bethany Joy. We call her BJ. She lives up in Ohio. Mary called her. She and her roommate came down. They brought clothes expecting to come for a funeral. I don't remember BJ being there. Mary said she would walk away and BJ would sit beside my bed and just talk to me and talk to me and talk to me. I don't remember any. I know she was there because Mary said she was there. But I don't remember anything about her being there, anything about what she said. She wrote me a funny note afterwards, says next time I got to come down for emergency, I'm going to bring purple hair down. You're going to be purple. I wouldn't put it past her. It was really, really rough for several days after surgery. I didn't get better. I was put on a ventilator to help my organs. My wife said I fought the ventilator. I would not do the ventilator. I told the doctor absolutely no, I will not do a ventilator. He finally talked me into it, said it'll help your organs. I don't remember any of that. I don't remember being on a ventilator. I remember some weird things happening to me, but I don't know what they were. They found another area of infection, and because it was around Christmas and so many people were off and short-staffed, they transferred me down to Providence, and they drained another 750 cc's of infection out of me. Again, I don't know how much that is, but I guess it's a lot. Sometime after Christmas, Mary said they brought me out of the coma and had a really, really hard time waking me up. I just remember day after day after day of pain. And I can't explain this, but I saw some very, very dark things. I knew I was saved, I knew my sins were forgiven, I knew I was going to heaven, but I saw some dark things that I cannot describe. And the only thing that I can equate it with is the devil fighting Jesus for my soul. I don't know if that's right or not, but I just know I saw some horribly dark things that I cannot describe. But I also had some really long talks with Jesus that I remember. I was very, very thirsty, and at one point I saw heaven. And the first time I told this story, I said, I don't know really whether God gave me a vision or whether I was actually there. But the more I think about it, and the more thoughts come back to my mind, I think I was actually there. I did not see all the beauty that everybody talks about, but I saw Jesus. And I ran to Jesus, and I got a bear hug from Jesus. Jesus took me in his arms, and he gave me a bear hug. And I can remember as I'm there in his arms, there's a body of water over here and some animals walking around, and I was so thirsty. And I asked Jesus, I said, can I get a drink out of this water? And here's God's sense of humor, because he said, yes, but be careful because the animals don't always watch where they step. But I can remember laying there in that water and just the coolness running over me. And it felt so good. How do you get a bear hug from Jesus? I don't know. But I told Jesus, I said, I did not know that it would take so long or hurt so bad to die. The doctors say I'm going to die. Will you please just come and get me? And I prayed that over and over again. I said, I did not know that it would take so long. I did not know that it would hurt so bad. And I can remember actually raising my hand off the bed, hoping God would reach down and take my hand and pull me up to heaven. And I prayed that over and over and over again. Will you please come and get me? And I heard God's voice. Just as clear as I can hear myself talking to you this morning, God spoke in an audible voice. It wasn't a whisper to my heart like we have sometimes. It was an audible voice. And God said, I will come get you if that's what you really want. He said, if that is what you really want, I will come get you. But then he said, but do you really want to go and leave your wife here all by herself? And I told him, no, God, I don't. But I hurt so bad. And God spoke again. And I'm quoting him word for word. Then why don't you let me prove that I am still a miracle-working God? And let's prove those doctors wrong. I will be exalted. That's God. And I told him, I said, God, I'm not God. I don't want to be God. You're God. I want you to be God. You do what you want to do. And I began to get better. Slowly but surely, I began to get better. They finally transferred me into a private room, and a woman came in and she said, you're going to need rehab. I didn't know why I was going to need rehab, but she said, you're going to need rehab, and gave me the choice of 2 different rehab facilities, one downtown and one over in Elgin. I think it's Midlands Rehab. If you need rehab, that's the place to go, by the way. I chose that one because it was only 15 minutes from our house, so Mary could get back and forth a lot easier. When I got there, I weighed 118 pounds, and I had lost all muscle movement. The only thing I could do was turn my head and pick my hands up. I couldn't even pick my arms up. I had lost everything. I didn't know you could lose it like that. The caseworker came in and she told me insurance will pay for 3 weeks. I don't know if we can keep you. And my two main therapists, Carly and Lindsay, two great girls. We call them girls because they're younger than me, everybody's girls. But they told me later they racked their brains trying to figure out what can we do with this guy to get him the help he needs. They called me their star patient. They said, we've never had anybody in here that worked as hard as you do. I had at least 3 hours of therapy every day, including Sunday. But I worked at it. I just wanted to go home. I really just wanted to go home and lay in bed with my wife. It wasn't a sex thing or anything. It was just lay in bed with my wife, knowing I was in my own bed with my own wife, and just relaxed and comfortable. They called me their star patient. They told me, they said, we talk about you in our staff meetings, how hard you work. The first day that they took me down to the gym, they had to get a special wheelchair with a high back that would tilt back because I couldn't hold my head up. And the first day they took me down to the gym, this big guy wheeled me up on the platform with bars on either side, and he said, I want you to put your hands on those bars and stand up. And I looked at him and said, I can't. And he reached down and picked me up and put a hand on each bar, and I put a hand on each bar, and he let go of me and snapped the picture real quick to send to my wife before I collapsed back in my wheelchair. But I worked, and I worked, and I worked. Before I could leave the facility, I had to be able to walk 250 steps unassisted, only with a walker. I had to be able to climb a set of flight stairs. I had to be able to get into and out of bed by myself. And I had to be able to take a shower by myself. That's a trip, too, when you got a 20-some-year-old girl helping a 60-some-year-old guy take a shower. But I learned early on there's no sense of privacy anymore. It didn't matter. But the day came when I passed all those tests. And as I was in rehab, I kept hearing them every so often. They would call Code Parker and a room number. And one day as my aide was taking me down to the gym, they called Code Parker, and I said, what's this Code Parker thing? And she said, oh, it's nothing bad. She said, we're only a couple years old here, and the first guy to get out of our program successfully, his last name was Parker. So now every time somebody gets discharged, we call Code Parker, and we clap them out of the building. And the day came on January 30. When I'm sitting in my wheelchair in my room, and my wife has got everything all packed up, and I hear Code Parker, room 215. And my aide came and got me and wheeled me out of my room, and it was a straight shot down the hallway to the doorway, and that hallway was jam-packed with doctors and nurses and therapists and cafeteria workers and janitors and anybody that didn't have anything else to do. And what a racket. And as my aide wheeled me down the hallway, my main therapist, Lindsay, stepped out and stopped her. And she leaned over me and she said, Mr. Deal, would you like to walk out of this place? And I said, yes, ma'am, I would. And she brought a walker. And with her by my side, I walked through that crowd of cheering people. There was not a dry eye in the place. As they walked me out of that place, I will be exalted is what God says. And that was God. Amen. Amen. I had 2 months of in-home therapy. I had a nurse and a therapist coming to the house 2 or 3 times a week. And when I got home, I told Mary, I said, I want to go to Walmart. Because I want to buy a cane. Because I want to get rid of this walker. And my sister-in-law lent me her motorized wheelchair, and we could wheel around, and Mary could take me for walks up and down the road. But we went to Walmart and we bought a cane. And I told Mary, I said, by the end of February, I'm going to be off of the walker and using the cane. 2 weeks later, I started using the cane. And I remember one night we were sitting there watching a movie on TV, and I had to use the bathroom, and I got up and walked across the living room to the bedroom and realized I forgot my cane, and turned around and went back and got it, and then walked back across the living room. I will be exalted. I remember when I got home, I told Mary, I said, I want to go to church. She said, are you sure? I said, yes. Because I told God the first chance I get, when I get home, I'm going to church. And when Pastor Eric gives that altar call, I'm coming down. And I sat back there in my wheelchair, and Eric was going to get out and push me. I was halfway down the aisle before she got out of her pew. Because I wanted to say, God, thank you. You have been exalted. Thank you. a promise God gave me from Jeremiah chapter 30, for I will restore health to you and heal you of your wounds. Again, I will build you, and you shall be rebuilt. And then over in 2 Corinthians, I didn't mark it, so I got to find it, but it's in here, believe me. First chapter of 2 Corinthians, it says, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our tribulations, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any trouble with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. And I wrote in my margin, maybe I can help somebody else by what I've been through myself. I didn't ask for this trip. Sometimes God gives us things that we don't ask for. But He also says in His Word, all things work together for good to them that love God. And I look back, and I see how this has worked together for good. Because I love God. What's next for me? Again, I can't do anything normal. Doctor told me after my last surgery, he said, you've had 4 surgeries in the same place. I've been cut from here to here. He said, you got a good chance of getting a hernia. He said, if you don't, great. If you do, we'll fix it. Well, I can't just do anything normal. I got 3. So I'm back to the doctor, Dr. Gill again, and he said, you don't have to fix them, but I said, yeah, I want them fixed, and I'll go back to him, and we'll figure out what steps are necessary to take care of that. But through it all, I have watched God work. I've watched God be exalted. How many people can say I've seen Jesus face to face? How many people can say I got a bear hug from Jesus? How many people can say I have literally heard God out loud speak? Does that make me any different than anybody else or any more special? No. No. It's just how God deals with each one of us. And my prayer this morning, do you know Him? Do you know Jesus? If you don't, you can. I'd like us to stand, Kenny, if you'd come lead us in a song. You can know this Jesus. Jesus can be your friend just like He is mine. I look at Jesus as more than a Savior, as more than a helper when we're sick or when we're down. I look at Him as my bud. A guy that will sit on the couch and watch NASCAR for me and cheer along with me, even though one of my favorite drivers drives for a beer company. I picture God in a set of cowboy boots and Levi's and a flannel shirt, just sitting there, and He and I going out hunting together and working together. That's how I picture Him. And you can picture Him the same way if you don't already. And I know a lot of you come to the altar to pray for other things. That's great. You're welcome. But if you don't know Jesus this morning, here's a shot at it. Please take that shot.